This training class is on title insurance, specifically how to read the preliminary commitment for title insurance, or as we refer to it, the title prelim. The first step one, is to open escrow. What this means is once a contract has been accepted by both parties, we deposit both the documents, the contract itself, and the funds with a neutral third party to manage that until all conditions are fulfilled. The way that we do that is the buyer's agent takes the buyer's earnest money as well as the contract to the escrow officer. And this should happen immediately after contract acceptance. In fact, ADRE says that escrow needs to be opened within 1 business day of the contract execution. And we need to manage that very carefully. We need escrow earnest money receipts turned into the office as quickly as possible, and we need to be able to show in the event of an ADRE audit that we managed to make sure that escrow was opened within 1 business day of contract acceptance. And ADRE actually has the right to fine us $1,000 per file when we cannot show that. So in the event that you represent the seller and the buyer's agent doesn't open escrow in a timely manner, then you and the seller need to cure the buyer to make sure that escrow gets opened. Title insurance. The purpose of title insurance is to provide coverage against defects in the title prior to the buyer's ownership. It protects against prior fraud or forgery. It assures the buyer that they're getting marketable title, and it protects the interest of the mortgage lender as well if the buyer is getting a mortgage on the property. It is important that when you open escrow, you're going to be waiting for the prelim to come out. It should happen in the first few days, 3 to 5 days from the time you open escrow until the time you get the title prelim, depending on how busy the escrow companies and the title plant are. But once you get that, per Section 3C of the purchase contract, lines 94 to 103, the buyer has 5 days from the receipt of this title commitment to notify all the parties of any exceptions that they need to make. So basically, the buyer has the right to cancel the contract and get their earnest money back if they're notifying the parties of an exception to the title commitment. So maybe there is something that pops up on that title that's going to prevent them from having clear title. They have 5 days from the time they get the prelim to object to that. So we, as the buyer's agent, as the seller's agent, whoever we represent, we need to manage that timeline appropriately and make sure that our parties are reviewing that information and acting upon it. What are we going to be looking for when we review the title prelim? There are 3 main parts. First, Schedule A, also Schedule B, and then the requirements section of that title prelim. In Section A, this is where you're going to find the general information for the transaction. It's going to tell us who the escrow officer is, what the contact information for the title company, as well as the parties are. It's going to give us the subject property address. It's going to provide a full legal description. It's going to tell us the sales price, also the insured amount, if there's a loan, who the lender is, and it also is going to describe the parties and their marital status of both the buyer and the seller. And that is very important because we need to know who is going to need to be available for signing and whether or not there's going to be any disclaimer deeds required. Schedule B is going to tell us the exceptions. It's going to show us if there are CC&Rs, if there's an HOA, if there are any main easements on the property, and also if there's any recorded leases on the property. The requirements section is going to show us any specific items that have to be addressed in order to provide the buyer with clear title. So if there are any current property tax requirements, are going to show up there, assessments, encumbrances, liens, all of that stuff will show up in the requirements section. And it'll just say specifically what needs to happen to those before it gets recorded in order to provide that new buyer with full title. Potential title threats. The things that we are looking for, that we're trying to protect the buyer against, are things that might have happened in the past. Like if a deed was transferred by persons that were supposedly single, but they were actually married. So if you had someone that bought it as sole and separate, but they were actually married, that spouse would actually have some rights to the title. So we would need to make sure that that was clarified and taken care of before our buyer purchased the property, so that this spouse doesn't come back later with a title claim. If a deed was delivered after the death of a grantor without consent of the grantor, that would be something that somebody might have some rights to the title that we would want to protect our buyer against. A deed in lieu of foreclosure that was only signed under duress would be a problem. Marital rights of a spouse purportedly but not legally divorced. So if someone was going through a divorce and they were selling the property and they said they were divorced but the divorce wasn't actually final, then that spouse might also have rights to the property. Impersonation of a true owner, deeds by a minor, deeds by persons of unsound mind, and also deeds to or from a defunct corporation. More potential threats: deeds by foreign parties, forged deeds, forged releases, surviving children that were omitted from a will, misrepresentation of a will, a defective notary. If someone had notarized a deed or something on a deed that wasn't a true notary, that could be a problem. Erroneous tax reports, and also mistakes in the recordation of the documents. And then the next thing we're going to do is go through an actual example of a preliminary title commitment and look for things in there, and that will be in section 2.